The silence wasn't the weapon that broke you. It was the story you told yourself in the quiet that did the real damage. The one where you were the villain, and their departure was the punishment you deserved. It wasn't her silence that broke you. It was your belief that it was your fault. The silence they leave behind is never truly empty. At first, it feels like a space, a sudden, sharp void where a voice used to be. But a void is an unnatural state, and the human mind will rush to fill it with something, anything, to make sense of the sudden emptiness. So you filled it. You didn't consciously choose the material. Your oldest instincts did it for you. You filled the silence with the heaviest substance you own, blame. In the deafening quiet, you began to write a story, a narrative you know by heart because you have been rehearsing it your entire life. It is the story where you are the author of your own undoing, the secret villain in a tragedy where you are also the only victim. This story feels true not because it is, but because it is familiar. A reason, even a painful one, feels safer than the chaos of being abandoned without cause. A story where you are flawed offers a twisted kind of control in a situation where you felt you had none. There is a name for this feeling that settles so deep in your bones. It goes beyond simple guilt, which says, "I did something bad." This is a more primal wound, the one researcher Brené Brown calls shame. It doesn't just whisper. It seeps into your identity. It's the quiet, unshakable belief that says, "I am bad." Their silence became a blank page onto which you projected your deepest fear, the fear that you are fundamentally unlovable, that your very essence is flawed. You wrote a confession without a crime, admitting fault for a departure you never caused. You took responsibility because, for some, the weight of self-blame feels more manageable than the terrifying lightness of being insignificant to someone who was significant to you. It's a story you tell yourself to give their departure meaning, even if that meaning is your own deficiency. This reflex, this immediate and unconscious impulse to take the blame, is not a weakness. It is a survival strategy. It is the scar tissue of an older wound. The physician Gabor Mate speaks of this as a form of self-abandonment, a pattern learned when love felt conditional and precarious. For a mind shaped by early attachment wounds, it is far less terrifying to believe, "I am flawed," than to accept the shattering reality that the person I depend on is unreliable. An unreliable world is chaos. A flawed self is a project that can be fixed. So you took their failure to love you, their inability to communicate, and you internalized it. You transformed it into your failure to be worthy of love. You have been blaming yourself to maintain a fragile connection to their memory, because this pattern of self-abandonment is the only way you were ever taught to hold on to anything. You did not simply experience their absence. You experienced it as a judgment. Their departure wasn't just a closing door. It felt like the gavel strike in a trial you never knew was being held. In the aftermath, their silence became an empty courtroom where you were the only one present. You were cast as the sole defendant, but also as the relentless prosecutor and the silent jury. Every memory you once cherished was confiscated and brought into this courtroom, not as a souvenir of a shared life, but as evidence for the prosecution. That time you felt anxious and needed reassurance? Exhibit A, neediness. That moment you were clumsy with your words or showed a moment of weakness. Exhibit B, instability. You sift through your own history with a relentless, critical eye, searching for the flaw that justifies the punishment of their absence. You put yourself on the stand and cross-examine your own heart until it confesses to crimes it never committed. The real agony you feel now is not from a verdict they handed down, because they never gave one. The true, grinding pain is from the verdict you delivered to yourself, in the hollow echo of that silent room. This is a phantom indictment, a judgment without a judge. It feels like being handed a heavy, ornate box, locked tight. You were told, perhaps not in words, but in moments and glances, that something precious was inside. And then they walked away, taking the key with them. But instead of questioning the person who left you with an impossible puzzle, You concluded the fault must lie in you. You believe you are unworthy of knowing how to open it. So you sit on the floor and begin the impossible work. You spend your days and nights trying to carve a key out of your own bones, trying to reshape your own soul into a tool that might just fit the lock. You bleed yourself dry on the belief that the fault is your inability to find the right shape, your failure to be clever or patient enough. You never allow yourself to consider the simple, devastating truth that you were handed a box that was never meant to be opened, a promise that was always going to be broken. The flaw was never in your hands. It was in the lock itself. This reflex you have, this immediate gut-level instinct to apologize for your own existence when someone leaves, it did not begin with them. This pattern of assuming fault is a much older ghost. It is a survival tool you forged in a past where taking the blame was the only way to make the world feel safe. This habit of turning inward and finding yourself guilty is not a character flaw. It is an echo of a time when your survival depended on it. You learn to blame yourself first because, for a child, an emotionally unpredictable parent is a kind of terror that threatens the very fabric of their world. To a child's mind, it is far less terrifying to believe, "I am too much," or "I am not good enough," than it is to confront the unbearable reality. The source of my safety, my food, my love, is not reliable. An unreliable world is chaos. But a flawed self? That is a problem that can be worked on. If you are the problem, then you can also be the solution. You can try to be better, quieter, less needy, more pleasing. It is the child's brilliant, desperate strategy to restore order, to earn a connection that should have been given freely. Think back to the feeling. A child who learns that they're crying, their most honest expression of need, causes their parent to withdraw in anger, or worse, with a cold, flat indifference. That child does not learn that their parent is limited or wounded. That child learns a much deeper, more dangerous lesson. My needs are a burden. My feelings are a weapon that drives love away. And so, the child learns to swallow the tears, to push the feeling down until it becomes a permanent lump in their throat. They don't just learn to be quiet. They learn that self-abandonment is the price of admission for a fleeting moment of connection. They become an expert at monitoring the emotional temperature of a room, at becoming whatever they need to be to keep the peace. You learned that your own needs were the cause of disconnection, so you learned to have no needs at all. This person's silence today did not create a new wound. It simply pressed down with surgical precision on that very old one. The story you tell yourself now, "I was too much, I pushed them away," is the same story that quiet child told themselves in their bedroom after a parent's withdrawal. Their departure didn't teach you that you were unworthy. It only confirmed a lie you were taught to believe about yourself long ago. The familiar ache you feel is not just the loss of them. It is the grief of that child within you who is once again concluding, "It was my fault. It was always my fault." In order to uphold the story that it was your fault, you have to become a full-time employee in the business of their innocence. This isn't a passive state of sadness. It is a grueling, active job. It is the work of constantly editing the past, of becoming a meticulous historian for a narrative that isn't true. You spend your waking hours, and many of your dreaming ones, sifting through the archives of your memory. You don't look for joy. You look for proof of your own failure. You scan old conversations not for their warmth, but for your mistakes. You zoom in on your own perceived flaws, magnifying them until they eclipse any memory of their shortcomings. Their moments of coldness, their subtle dismissals, their inability to show up for you. You diligently erase them. You relabel them as your misinterpretations, as you being too sensitive or expecting too much. This internal labor is exhausting. You aren't just missing them. You are actively working, day after day, to protect the pristine image of the person who hurt you, because their innocence is required to prove your guilt. This is the lonely work of a museum curator. In the silent, empty halls of your mind, you have built a museum dedicated to them. You are its sole curator and its only visitor. Every morning, you arrive and begin your duties. You lovingly dust off the portraits of their best self, the person you wanted them to be. You polish the glass cases that display the artifacts of their affection. A kind word, a fleeting smile. You write and rewrite the little captions beneath each memory, carefully phrasing them to explain away any inconsistencies, to justify their behavior. You become an apologist for their absence. It is a shrine to a memory, a testament to a potential that was never realized, and you are its faithful keeper. But while you spend all of your energy maintaining this gleaming, perfect exhibit for them, another part of the museum is falling into ruin. Your own gallery, the one that holds your needs, your worth, your truth, is left in the dark. Dust settles on your own portraits. The stories of your strength and resilience are forgotten in a damp, unlit wing. The lights are kept off there because illuminating your own worth would cast a shadow on their perfection. You are keeping their memory alive at the expense of your own life. The exhaustion you feel isn't just grief. It is the profound, bone-deep weariness of a person who is working tirelessly to maintain an illusion that requires them to be the villain. And so, the work continues. You are trapped in a loop, replaying conversations in your mind with the focus of a detective, hoping to find the one clue you missed. You analyze your actions, you dissect your words, you hold your own behavior under a microscope, believing that if you can just find the mistake you made, you can solve the puzzle of their departure. This search feels productive. It feels like you are doing something, like you are taking control because you are operating under a painful but logical premise. If you caused it, you can fix it. If you can just identify the flaw in your own character, you can mend it, and in doing so, you might retroactively mend the connection that was broken. But this is the core contradiction of your suffering. You are looking for answers about their inability to communicate by relentlessly examining your own soul. You are trying to understand their choices by cataloging your own perceived defects. This is the emotional equivalent of being led into a vast, sun-scorched desert and then being left there alone. As the days pass, an overwhelming thirst sets in. But instead of questioning the landscape, instead of questioning the person who led you to a place with no water, you begin to blame yourself for being thirsty. You look at your dry lips and your aching body and you think, my thirst is the problem. If only I weren't so needy, if only I didn't require water to survive, this desert would be a perfectly fine place to be. You start to believe that your need for love, for connection, for a simple explanation, is a character flaw. You are standing in the middle of an emotional wasteland, blaming yourself for needing what is essential to life, instead of questioning why you were ever led to believe that this barren place could be a home. You are seeking water from a dry well. You keep lowering your bucket into the darkness again and again, and when it comes up empty, you blame the bucket. You blame the rope. You blame the way you held it. You tell yourself that if you were just a little more patient, a little more skilled, a little more worthy, the well would surely provide. But the problem is not in your effort or your worthiness. The problem is that the well is, and always has been, empty. The answers you are so desperately digging for inside yourself do not exist there. They never did. You are looking for the source of their silence within your own heart, but it can only be found in their own emotional emptiness. Your mind clings to a painful but simple equation. If I had been different, they would have stayed. It is the engine behind your self-blame, a desperate kind of emotional mathematics. If I hadn't been so anxious, they would have felt calm. If I had been more independent, they wouldn't have felt smothered. If I were better, they would have been better. This is the great delusion of control. It is a story that, while agonizing, provides a false sense of agency over a situation that was utterly out of your hands. The pain of this story is structured. It is a cage, but it is a familiar cage with predictable bars. You cling to this belief because the alternative is a terrifying void. The possibility that you had no control at all. that your actions, your love, your very being were not deciding factors in their choice to leave. But then, a thought enters, quiet and unwelcome at first. What if their silence had nothing to do with you? What if their departure was not a reaction to your worth, but a pre-written scene in their own life, a decision born from their own fears, their own history, their own limitations? This thought is terrifying because it means you were powerless. It means that no amount of self-improvement or perfect behavior could have changed the outcome. The entire foundation of your self-blame, the structure that has given your pain a twisted sense of meaning, begins to tremble. It feels like the floor is giving way because you are losing the one thing that felt certain, your own guilt. It's the feeling of being on a stage under a single, harsh spotlight. You have been performing with all your heart, believing an important audience is watching your every move. You deliver your lines perfectly, you make the sacrifices the role demands, you pour all of your energy into the performance of being the right person for them. And then, in a moment of clarity, you look past the glare of the light and realize the theater is empty. It has been empty for a long time. The person you were performing for had already left. Your greatest efforts, your most painful contortions of self, they were for an audience of ghosts. The terror of this realization is immense, because it means you were never in control. But in that terror, there is a flicker of liberation. If no one was watching, then you are not to blame for how the play ended. You are simply a person, alone on a stage, who is finally free to walk away from a role you were never meant to play. There is another layer to this, a deeper reason why you felt so responsible for the outcome. You were likely cast in a role you never auditioned for a long time ago. It is the role of the emotional caretaker. You learned that love wasn't something you simply received. It was a job you performed. It was the quiet, demanding work of anticipating and managing another person's unspoken feelings. You were trained to become a human barometer, constantly sensing the shifts in the emotional atmosphere around you. You learned to walk on eggshells to avoid cracking the fragile peace. You learned that your own needs had to be silenced so that you could better hear the unexpressed needs of others. Love, for you, became synonymous with this vigilance. It meant keeping someone else happy, stable, and calm. Your value was tied to your success in regulating their inner world. So when they went silent, you did not experience it as their choice to withdraw. You experienced it as your professional failure. You had one job: to keep them emotionally engaged, to manage their feelings so they wouldn't leave, and in your mind you failed. Their silence was not just an absence. It was a devastating performance review. It was proof that you had failed in the only role you were ever taught was important. The weight you feel is not just the weight of missing them. It is the crushing burden of a responsibility you were never meant to carry. You are grieving the loss of the person, but you are also grieving the failure of your own perceived duty to keep them from harm, even from themselves. You see yourself as the lighthouse keeper, standing alone on a rock in the middle of a vast, unpredictable sea. You believe your sole purpose is to keep your light burning, a steady, unwavering beam to guide their ship through the treacherous waters. You obsess over the brightness of your light, polishing the lens, ensuring nothing could ever dim its glow. So when their ship, without warning, turns and sails directly into a dense, impenetrable fog, you do not think, "They have chosen the fog." You think, "My light was not bright enough. I failed to guide them." But you were never the keeper of their lighthouse, responsible for their journey. You were just another boat navigating the same waters. And they, for their own reasons, chose to steer their vessel into the mist, a direction you could never have illuminated or prevented. You were not their guide. You were simply a witness to their course. Let this truth settle in your mind, not as an attack on them, but as a simple, observable fact. Emotionally mature people use their words. Even when it is difficult, even when it is painful, they use communication as a bridge. An emotionally unavailable person, however, uses silence. They use it as a shield, as a weapon, as a means of escape. It is the native language of those who cannot bear the weight of accountability, who lack the tools to navigate the complexities of conflict or intimacy. Their silence, therefore, was not a reflection of your value. It was a reflection of their capacity. It was not a statement about your worthiness to receive an explanation. It was a clear demonstration of their inability to provide one. Their silence speaks volumes, not about who you are, but about who they are and what they are capable of offering. It speaks of their fear. It speaks of their limitations. It speaks of a profound emotional poverty that has nothing to do with you. For months, perhaps years, you have been standing in a gallery of your own making, staring at what you believe is a portrait they painted of you. In this portrait, you see all your flaws rendered in harsh, unforgiving detail. You see the lines of anxiety around your eyes, the posture of neediness, the colors of inadequacy. You have studied this painting so closely, for so long, that you have come to believe it is your true and accurate likeness. You have accepted that this is how they saw you, and therefore this is who you must be. The pain of this image has defined you, haunted you, and kept you trapped in a cycle of shame and self-recrimination. But now I invite you to look closer, step forward, and dare to see past the image you've projected. What if you were never looking at a portrait at all? What if all this time you have been staring at a mirror? A cold, polished, reflective surface. The emptiness you saw, the coldness you felt, the silence that bounced back at you. It was never a painting of you. It was a perfect reflection of their own empty hands. The vacant expression you thought was their judgment of you was simply the reflection of their own emotional vacancy. The image was never about you. Your presence merely allowed their emptiness to be reflected back. You were not the subject of their art. You were simply standing in front of a mirror that showed you the truth of their own inner landscape. If their silence was a mirror, then the path forward is not about forgetting the reflection you saw. The memories are part of your story. Trying to erase them is a futile war against yourself. The work is far more subtle and far more powerful. It is about learning to fire the relentless prosecutor who has been living inside your head, the one who twists every memory into evidence against you. The work is to change the internal voice that narrates your pain. It is the slow, deliberate practice of shifting your inner monologue from one of harsh accusation to one of quiet observation. It is learning to separate their actions from your identity, to see what happened as an event in your life, not the defining truth of your life. The voice of accusation is a familiar one. It speaks in questions that have no answers. What did I do wrong? How could I have been so foolish to trust them? Why am I not enough to make someone stay? This voice spirals downward, pulling you into a vortex of shame and regret. It is a heavy, cyclical monologue that offers no relief, only the constant, grinding pain of self-recrimination. It feels true because it is loud and relentless. But there is another voice you can learn to cultivate. It is the voice of observation. It is quieter, calmer, and it speaks in simple, declarative sentences. It says, "They chose to be silent. That choice is information." It says, "They were unable to meet me where I was." That reveals their capacity, not my worth. This voice doesn't seek blame. It seeks clarity. It doesn't judge. It notices. It looks at the same set of facts but tells a different, more truthful story. A story about their limitations, not your defects. Think of it like this. For a long time, there has been a song playing on a radio in the room of your mind. It's a sad, painful song, and it has been stuck on repeat. Its lyrics are all about your flaws, your mistakes, your unworthiness. You have listened to it for so long that you have forgotten it is just a song. You have come to believe it is the sound of reality itself. The goal is not to find a hammer and smash the radio to pieces. The goal is to simply realize, after all this time, that you have the power to reach out and gently turn the dial. You can change the station. The old, painful song might still play faintly in the background, a ghost in the static, but you no longer have to treat its lyrics as the truth. You can choose to tune into a quieter frequency, the simple, steady hum of observation. This is the work. Not to destroy the radio, but to remember again and again that you are the one who can change the station. As you learn to listen to the quiet voice of observation, a final, profound realization begins to surface. The deepest source of your pain may come from a subtle, unconscious form of ego. It is the natural human assumption that when we love someone, we are central to their story. We believe we are the protagonist, or at least the co-star, in the narrative we are building together. Therefore, their departure must be a pivotal plot twist, a grand statement about our character. The pain is so immense because we believe our role was that significant. We have been operating under the assumption that their story was, in large part, about us. This belief, born of intimacy and hope, is what gives their silence the power to shatter our sense of self. The ultimate insight, the one that is both devastating and profoundly liberating, is this: you were not the main character in their story. You were a supporting character, perhaps a beloved one, perhaps a pivotal one for a chapter or two, but a supporting character nonetheless. You were part of a narrative they have been writing about themselves their entire lives. Their choices, their fears, their patterns, and their ultimate departure were driven by their own internal plot. A story that began long before you arrived on the scene, and one that will continue long after your chapter has ended. Your pain came from believing your role was bigger than it was, from mistaking their story for your own. It is like you have been trying, with all your heart and energy, to edit a book that does not belong to you. You have been frantically scribbling notes in the margins, trying to change the direction of the plot. You've been pleading with the main character to make different choices, highlighting passages you think they should reread, attempting to rewrite your own character's lines to make them more essential to the ending. But you were never the author. You were never the editor. You were simply a character in someone else's work. The greatest liberation comes not from ripping out the pages, but from the quiet, simple act of closing the book. It does not mean the book was bad, or that your chapter was meaningless. It only means that it is not your story to write. And as you place it gently on the shelf, you turn and see before you a clean, blank page. It is the first page of your own book, a story that is waiting for its protagonist. You are finally free to pick up the pen. And so we return to where we began. The silent, echoing void and the heavy cloak of blame you used to shield yourself from it. The journey out of that shame, as the researcher Brené Brown suggests, is not found in proving your innocence to the person who left. It is found in empathy. It is found in the quiet, courageous act of offering yourself the understanding you so desperately sought from them. It is the vulnerability of looking at your own story, your pain, your perceived flaws, your longing, and meeting it with compassion instead of judgment. The healing you thought was in their hands, locked away behind their silent lips, was always within you. It is the gift of your own understanding, the only validation that can truly set you free. This is the path of compassionate inquiry that physician Gabor Mate speaks of. The true healing journey is not found in getting an answer to the question, why did they leave? But in gently asking a new question of yourself. Why did I learn that I had to carry blame that was never mine to hold? What happened in my story that taught me that self-abandonment was the price of love? The focus shifts from their silence to your own history, not with an eye of criticism, but with one of profound curiosity and kindness. You begin to trace the wound back to its source, not to relive the pain, but to finally understand its shape. In the end, their silence did not break you. Couldn't. It only applied enough pressure to reveal the pre-existing fracture, the old, deep wound of self-abandonment that has been waiting quietly in the dark. The way forward is not to patch that crack with cement and pretend it never happened. The path is to do as the Japanese artists do with broken pottery in the art of kintsugi. You do not hide the break. You illuminate it. You fill the fracture with liquid gold, making the piece more beautiful and more resilient than it was before. The wound ceases to be a mark of shame and becomes the source of your most profound strength, a testament to the fact that you survived and had the courage to fill your own broken places with the gold of self-reclamation. We have put together a short guide. It's not about healing. It's about recognition. It's a quiet space to help you name the wounds you carry and to take the first, clean breath after acknowledging them. It's free, it's honest, and it's for you. The link is below. If this silence felt familiar, it's because the wound is older than her absence. But the place where that wound begins to heal is somewhere else. Not with another person, but with a new conversation. One that's waiting for you when you're ready to listen. You'll find it in the next story.